On my wedding day, I found my sister moaning with my groom on the stairs. My mom sided with her. "You're just an adopted stray." They kicked me out. Then a billionaire showed up. "Rachel, I'm your birth mother." Now they're begging at my doorstep. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. Today was supposed to be my wedding day. You know that feeling, right? The one where the world seems to be humming on a frequency that only you can hear. That was me. I was standing in the little bride's room behind the chapel, the scent of white lilies and old polished wood filling the air. My dress, a simple, elegant A-line gown I'd saved for a year to buy, felt like a second skin. It wasn't the most expensive, not by a long shot, but it was mine. My best friend and maid of honor, Jessica, was fussing with the veil. "Audrey, you're shaking," she said, her voice a mix of laughter and concern. "I'm not shaking, I'm vibrating with pure joy," I corrected her, grinning at our reflection in the antique mirror. "Can you believe it, Jess? After all these years, I'm finally marrying Preston." Preston. We'd been high school sweethearts. He was the quiet, steady force in my often chaotic life. He knew about my constant struggle to win my parents' approval, about how my sister, Mallory, always seemed to shine brighter, to be loved more. He was my safe harbor. We'd talked for hours about our future, a small house with a garden, 2 kids, maybe a dog. A simple, happy life. It was all I ever wanted. "He's a lucky guy," Jessica said, giving my shoulders a final squeeze. "Now, the music is starting in 10 minutes. Are you ready to do this?" "More than ready," I breathed. But 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The cheerful organ music quieted, replaced by a low, anxious murmur from the guests outside. Jessica poked her head out the door. "Your dad is starting to look nervous," she reported. "And Preston's not at the altar yet." The happy hum inside me fizzled out, replaced by a small, cold knot in the pit of my stomach. "That's not like him," I said, more to myself than to her. "He's always so punctual." I tried for a light laugh. "He's probably just getting some air, trying not to pass out." "I'll go find him," I said, forcing a smile. "Just make sure my dad doesn't start telling his fishing stories to the guests before I get back. We'll be here all night." I smoothed down my dress, the silk feeling suddenly heavy. I slipped out a side door, my heels sinking slightly into the soft grass, a strange premonition creeping over me. I checked the groom's suite. It was empty, a half-finished glass of whiskey sitting on the dresser. I walked through the small garden out back, the one where we'd taken engagement photos. Nothing. The knot in my stomach tightened into a painful fist. This wasn't right. I asked one of the groomsmen. He just shrugged, looking confused. "Haven't seen him for a half hour, Audrey." "Thought he was with you." My heart started hammering against my ribs. I made my way back toward the main building, my steps getting faster. I decided to try the less used back entrance, the one that led up a quiet, winding stairwell to the bell tower. And that's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong in a house of God. A soft, rhythmic moaning. It was low, guttural, and undeniably human. I told myself it was just the old building groaning. I told myself it was my imagination running wild. But I knew. Deep down, in that secret, dark place in your soul, I already knew. My hand trembled as I reached for the heavy oak door. I pushed it open just a crack. And there, in the dim, dusty light filtering through a high window, my entire world fell apart. "Mallory, we can't," a man's voice, Preston's voice, pleaded weakly. He was breathless. "It's my wedding day. We could get caught." A woman's laugh, low and throaty, echoed in the stairwell. It was a laugh I knew better than my own. the laugh that had always accompanied my childhood tears. My sister, Mallory. What's life without a little excitement, Preston? She purred, her hands tangled in his perfectly styled hair. The world tilted on its axis. The air left my lungs in a whoosh, and for a second, I couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't feel anything but the roaring in my ears. The beautiful dress, the fragrant lilies, the promises we'd made, it all turned to smoke. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I shoved the door open the rest of the way. It banged against the stone wall with a deafening crack. Audrey! Preston's face went white as a sheet. He scrambled away from Mallory, fumbling with the buttons of his tuxedo jacket like a guilty child. But Mallory just leaned back against the railing, a smug little smile playing on her lips. She slowly, deliberately, smoothed down her maid of honor dress, never once breaking eye contact with me. What the hell is this? My voice was a choked whisper, a stranger's voice. Oh, Audrey, please, let me explain, Preston stammered, holding his hands out as if to calm a wild animal. It's not what it looks like. Shut up, I snapped, the whisper turning into a venomous hiss. The shock was turning into something hot and ugly, crawling up my throat like bile. It's exactly what it looks like. I turned my gaze to the woman who shared my blood. How could you? How could you do this to me? And on my wedding day? The last words were a strangled sob. You're my sister, Mallory. She just shrugged, a picture of pure, unadulterated indifference. Please. Don't be so dramatic. Ever since we were kids, I've always taken what I wanted. Your toys, Mom and Dad's attention, you should be used to it by now. Taking your man is nothing to me. Nothing to you? The words felt like ash in my mouth. My whole body was trembling, a violent, uncontrollable shiver. You're that hungry for love, huh? Feasting on a man who betrays his bride at the altar. My voice cracked on the last word. The beautiful, perfect day, the life I had so carefully built, had been shattered into a million tiny, sharp pieces. The commotion, my raised voice, Preston's frantic pleading, drew my mother, Brenda, out from the main hall. She took one look at the scene, me in my white dress, my face a mess of tears and disbelief, Preston looking like a cornered rat, and Mallory looking as cool and composed as ever. My mother's face, instead of showing shock or horror, hardened into a familiar mask of annoyance. What is happening here? Look at all this noise, she demanded, her voice sharp. You're making a scene, Audrey. Mom, I cried, a desperate sliver of hope rising in me. This was my mother. Surely, she would see the blatant injustice, the raw pain I was in. Mom, Mallory's hooking up with Preston. Right here. At my wedding. My wedding! Brenda's eyes flickered from a defiant Mallory to my tear-streaked face, and the look in them wasn't sympathy. It was pure irritation. She marched right past Preston, right past her favored daughter, and stood directly in front of me. Then, she did something that fractured the last remaining piece of my heart. She slapped me. The sound was sharp and final in the echoing stairwell. How dare you raise a hand to your sister over this sort of nonsense, she spat, her voice cold as ice. I stared at her, my cheeks stinging, my mind reeling. Nonsense? Mom, he's my fiancé. We were about to get married. Oh, it's just a fiancé, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand, as if I were complaining about a spilled drink. If Mallory likes him, why not make today their wedding? Honestly, Audrey, you've always been so overly dramatic. The injustice of it all stole my breath. What are you talking about? Why do you always pick her side? Why do you hate me so much? Aren't I your daughter too? Mallory laughed, a cruel, triumphant sound that scraped against my raw nerves. How could you possibly compare to me, she sneered. You're just an adopted stray. The words hit me harder than the slap. Adopted. The word hung in the air, buzzing like a hornet. What did you just say? My mother's face twisted into a sneer. The pretense was over. She's right, she said, her voice dripping with years of resentment I never knew existed. You want to know the truth, Audrey? The real truth? Mallory was sick with leukemia when she was a child. The doctor said her only chance was a bone marrow transplant from a perfect match. We searched everywhere. And then we found you, in an orphanage a state over. A perfect match. She took a step closer, her eyes boring into mine. We only brought you into our home because you were a marrow match. We saved our real daughter's life with parts of you. Why else would we have taken you in? She looked me up and down, her gaze filled with a disgust that chilled me to the bone. Now that Mallory's healthy, we don't really need you around anymore. My father, Robert, had appeared in the doorway during her speech. He just stood there, his face pale and clammy, his hands stuffed in his pockets. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He never did when Brenda got like this. His silence was his complicity. His silence was his betrayal. I wasn't their daughter. I was a tool. A spare part. A walking, breathing insurance policy for their real daughter. Every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every hollow I love you is a lie. My entire life was a lie. Get out, Brenda said, her voice flat and final. You're a disgrace to this family. The wedding is off. Go on. Get out of our lives. They kicked me out. In my wedding dress, with my makeup running down my face, they kicked me out of the wedding that was supposed to be mine, out of the family that was never really mine to begin with. I stumbled out into the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my heels, the bright afternoon sun feeling like a cruel joke. I had nowhere to go. I had no one. I had lost everything in the span of 30 minutes. I don't really remember how I ended up at the Sleepy Hollow Motel on the edge of town. It's the kind of place with a flickering neon sign, peeling paint, and a lingering smell of stale cigarettes and despair. I must have walked for miles, a ghost in a white dress on the side of the highway. I didn't have my purse, my phone, my keys, nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart that had been ripped out of my chest. The woman at the front desk, a heavy-set lady with kind eyes and a name tag that read Mabel, took one look at my state and didn't ask a single question. No credit card, no ID. She just pulled a key from the board and slid it across the worn linoleum counter. Room 104, honey, she said softly. The door's around back. You can sort it all out tomorrow. I spent the next 2 days in that room. It was a small, brown box of a room, with a lumpy bed, a single window looking out onto a brick wall, and a television that only got static. I didn't turn it on. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at a water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like a screaming face. I replayed the scene in the stairwell over and over again in my head, each word, each look, a fresh stab of pain. You're just an adopted stray. We don't really need you around anymore. The words echoed in the suffocating silence until I thought I would go mad. On the third day, there was a knock on the door. It was a sharp, confident rap that sounded completely out of place. I ignored it. It came again, louder this time. Go away, I croaked, my voice raw and unused. Miss Audrey Coleman, a man's voice called through the door. It was firm, but polite. My name is Garrett Shaw. I'm here on behalf of Eleanor Vance. It's a matter of extreme urgency. I had no idea who Eleanor Vance was. I figured it was a mistake, or maybe Mabel had sent someone to collect payment for the room. With a sigh that felt like it came from the depths of my soul, I dragged myself to the door and opened it a crack, the safety chain still on. A man in an impeccably tailored dark suit stood there. He was tall, with a serious expression and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Behind him, a sleek black town car was parked, looking like a spaceship that had landed in the wrong universe. I think you have the wrong person, I said, my voice barely a whisper. If you are Audrey Coleman, born on May 12, 1998, then I have the right person, he said calmly. He held up a tablet. On the screen was a photo of a woman. She was stunning, with sharp, intelligent eyes, silver hair swept back from a strong-featured face, and an aura of power that radiated even from the picture. Mrs. Vance has been looking for you for a very long time. She's your birth mother. My mind went blank. Birth mother? After the bombshell the Colemans had dropped, my brain refused to process another life-altering shock. It had to be a cruel joke, some kind of elaborate scam. That's not possible, I whispered. It is, he said gently. She's waiting for you. At the Empire Hotel downtown. She was in a board meeting in California when she got the news. She canceled everything and flew here immediately. He explained that Eleanor was a prominent businesswoman who had hired a team of private investigators to search for me for over 20 years. They had finally gotten a solid lead that brought them here, to this town, to this motel. I didn't know what to believe, but then again, what did I have to lose? I was homeless, heartbroken, and utterly alone. I looked down at my wrinkled, stained wedding dress, the sad, pathetic symbol of my shattered life. Maybe this was a sign. A way out of the brown box room. I numbly unlatched the chain and opened the door. Okay. The ride to the Empire Hotel was a blur. The leather seats of the car felt impossibly soft against my skin. The city lights streaked past the window. Garrett didn't press me for details about my situation. He just offered me a bottle of water and sat in respectful silence. He told me that when his team located me, they learned I was supposed to be getting married. When Eleanor heard, her first instruction was, prepare a transfer of shares worth $1 billion. I need to gift her personally. The number was so staggering it sounded like a line from a movie, not something that could happen in real life. My life. He led me up a private elevator to the penthouse suite. The doors opened onto a marble foyer that was bigger than the entire first floor of the Coleman's house. Garrett knocked softly on a large double door before pushing it open. And there she was. The woman from the photo. Eleanor Vance. She was even more beautiful in person. The moment her eyes landed on me, they filled with tears, and the professional mask she wore seemed to melt away, revealing the face of a mother. Audrey, she breathed, her voice thick with decades of pent-up emotion. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and gently took my hands in hers. Her hands were warm and strong. My beautiful daughter. I've finally found you. Years of pain, of feeling like I was never quite enough, of the fresh, raw agony of the last few days, it all came bubbling to the surface. I broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. She just pulled me into her arms and held me tight, stroking my hair and murmuring, "It's okay. You're home now. Mama's got you." For the first time in my entire life, I felt like I truly was. Eleanor's home, our home, she corrected me gently, wasn't a house. It was a sprawling, magnificent estate nestled in the California hills, a palace of glass and white stone that seemed to float above the Pacific Ocean. As we walked through the grand entryway, with its soaring ceilings and a chandelier that looked like a frozen waterfall of diamonds, my cheap motel shoes made no sound on the polished marble floors. A line of uniformed staff stood waiting, and they all greeted me with a warm, synchronized, "Welcome home, Miss Vance." This is my home?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The sheer scale of it was dizzying. Eleanor squeezed my shoulder, her touch grounding me. "Everything you see, everything I have, is yours, my love. It always has been." The days that followed were like living in a dream someone else was having. Garrett, Eleanor's fiercely loyal and ever-present assistant, gave me a tour. There was a private library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, filled with over 30,000 books, all leather-bound first editions. A home theater with plush velvet seats. A stable with 6 beautiful horses. A garage that housed a collection of cars I'd only ever seen in movies. I remember picking up a small glass bell on a side table, noticing a tiny price tag still tucked underneath. It was $10,000. My mind reeled. That was more than my entire salary for a year at my old job as a receptionist. Garrett, noticing my expression, corrected me gently. Actually, it's Venetian blown crystal from Murano, Italy. A bit more than that, I'm afraid. It was a level of wealth so vast I couldn't wrap my head around it. That first night, I woke up in a bedroom the size of my old apartment. The bed was so large I felt lost in it, the sheets so soft they felt like water. I couldn't sleep. I crept out onto the balcony, the cool night air a welcome shock. Below me, the lights of the city glittered like a fallen constellation. I was a world away from the Sleepy Hollow Motel, a world away from the Colemans. I felt a strange mix of gratitude and overwhelming loneliness. Eleanor must have heard me. The door to her adjoining balcony opened. "Can't sleep either?" she asked softly. I just shook my head. She came and stood beside me, and for a long time, we just watched the lights in silence. Then, she told me everything. Her voice was soft, but laced with a pain that 25 years had not erased. "When you were a baby, my business was just taking off," she began. I was making a name for myself, and I was making enemies. My late husband, your father. Richard, he was my biggest supporter. A kind, wonderful man. Her voice broke for a moment. They couldn't get to me through my business, so they came after my heart. They went after him. They murdered him, Audrey. And they took you from me. Tears streamed down her face, silver in the moonlight. I have spent every waking moment, every spare dollar, since that day looking for you. I poured millions into the search. Private investigators, international agencies. I never gave up hope. She explained that the kidnappers had likely panicked and left me at an orphanage, where the Colemans, in their own selfish search, eventually found me. I took her hand. It felt so small and fragile in that moment. "It's all right, Mom. I'm back now, right?" "You are," she said, her voice firming with a steely resolve that I was beginning to recognize. "And I am here to make everything right. I heard about what happened at your wedding." The word hung in the air, heavy and bitter. She looked me straight in the eye. "Here," she said, gesturing to a sleek leather portfolio on the balcony table. "This is to help you start your new life. It's the official transfer of shares in my company. Starlight Corporation. They're worth $1 billion. It's just a fraction of your inheritance." I pushed it back gently. "There's no wedding. It was cancelled." The word still hurt to say. "Then consider it a breakup gift," she said, her eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "Cancelled? What happened? Did someone hurt you?" So I told her. I told her everything. The whole sordid, ugly story. Preston, Mallory, the slap, the cruel words. As I spoke, her expression grew colder and harder until it was like a mask carved from ice. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, her voice dangerously low, "It is unbelievable that a mere small-time trading family would dare to cross events." "Garrett," she called, though he seemed to materialize from the shadows as if he was always there. "I want the Coleman family erased. I want their business bankrupt, their name ruined. I want them to have nothing. Contact our lawyers." "Understood, ma'am," Garrett said without a flicker of emotion. A fierce, vindictive part of me rejoiced. But another part, the part that had been raised to be quiet and accommodating, hesitated. "Hold on, Mom," I said, surprising myself with my own audacity. I need to take care of this myself." Eleanor looked at me, a long, searching look. Then a slow, proud smile spread across her face. "Well, look at you," she said softly. "You certainly got my fire. All right, Audrey. The resources of the Vance family are at your fingertips. Whenever you're ready, you make your move. I knew then that the weak, heartbroken girl in the wedding dress was gone forever. In her place, someone else was starting to grow. Someone stronger. A few weeks later, I was starting to find a new rhythm. Life was a strange mix of adjusting to unimaginable wealth and trying to heal a lifetime of wounds. One afternoon, feeling a need for something normal, something from my old life, I had Garrett drive me to a small, unassuming food truck park by the beach. I just wanted a simple taco, a taste of a life where $10.00 tea glass bell wasn't a thing. I was sitting on a bench, enjoying the simple pleasure of it, when they showed up. Brenda and Mallory. They didn't see me at first. They were dressed in expensive-looking outfits, clearly trying to project an image of wealth. They were in the middle of a loud, ugly argument with the young man who ran the truck I'd just bought from. It turned out Mallory had accidentally bumped into him, spilling a tiny drop of salsa on her new, pristine white dress, a dress that she loudly proclaimed cost $2,000. Brenda was demanding he pay for it. "You poor people are always lying through your teeth," Brenda was sneering, her voice carrying across the park. "You probably did it on purpose. If you can't pay up, you'd better get on your knees and start apologizing, or I will call the police and have you arrested for assaulting my daughter." The young man looked terrified and humiliated. I had seen enough. I calmly finished my taco, wiped my hands, and walked over, my new, comfortable sandals making a soft sound on the pavement. "Isn't this a bit much, even for you two?" They spun around, and their jaws dropped when they saw me. "Audrey!" Mallory's eyes widened, then narrowed into suspicious slits. "What are you doing here? Got kicked out of wherever you were staying and now you're hanging with trash? You're a disgrace." "I found my real family," I said, my voice even and calm. The calmness seemed to unnerve them more than shouting would have. "I'm a Vance now. Not a Coleman." Brenda scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Frankly, it doesn't matter what your last name is. You will never even sniff the kind of life we live. A leopard can't change its spots." I ignored her and turned to the young truck owner. "How much for the dress?" $2,000, Brenda snapped before he could speak. I pulled out the sleek, black credit card Eleanor had given me, the one she called my walking around money card, the one with no limit. "I'll cover his damages," I said, handing it to the truck owner. He took it hesitantly, his eyes wide. He ran the card, and it was, of course, approved instantly. I took the receipt from his trembling hand and then turned to a stunned Mallory. "I believe this is mine now," I said, taking the dress, still on its hanger, from her grasp. "Playing the big shot now, huh?" Mallory sneered, recovering slightly. "Must have emptied your whole bank account for that little show." "Not even close," I said. Then, I did something I'd been dreaming of. I took out a pair of scissors from a small sewing kit I kept in my purse, a habit from my old, frugal life of mending my own clothes. And right there in front of them, I started cutting the expensive dress into long, elegant ribbons. "What are you doing?" "Stop! That's designer!" Brenda shrieked, lunging for it. I held it out of her reach. "Well," I said, methodically snipping off a sleeve. "I paid for it. So technically, it's mine. I can do whatever I want with it, right?" I let the ruined scraps of white fabric fall to the dusty ground at their feet. "You know, Brenda, Mallory, you should be careful who you antagonize. I hear the Vance family is hosting a huge gala tonight. It's for the top-tier elite, people with real class. If you cross the wrong people, you might find yourselves on the outside looking in." They stared at me, their faces a thunderous mixture of confusion and pure rage. "A Vance gala? And you were invited?" Mallory scoffed, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "How could you possibly know about that?" "Oh, I have my ways," I said with a small, secret smile. "If I see you there, good luck getting through the door." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing amidst the ruins of their expensive dress, their perfect little world starting to show some serious cracks. It was a small, petty victory, but it tasted incredibly sweet. The Vance Gala was an ocean of glittering diamonds and rustling silk, a swirling galaxy of California's most rich and powerful. It was held at our estate, the grounds transformed into a fairy tale landscape with thousands of twinkling lights strung through the ancient oak trees and champagne flowing from fountains. I wore a simple but stunning emerald green gown my mother had insisted on buying for me. As I looked at my reflection before heading downstairs, I felt like a different person. I was a different person. The girl from the Sleepy Hollow Motel wouldn't recognize the woman staring back at her. As I stood near the grand entrance, greeting guests with my mother, I saw them. The Colemans. Robert, Brenda, and Mallory, all dressed in their finest, which now looked cheap and garish in comparison to the couture gowns around them. They looked completely out of their element, clutching their invitation like it was a golden ticket to heaven. Mallory, ever the actress, had a bright, false smile plastered on her face, but her eyes darted around nervously. When she spotted me, she nudged her mother. They marched over, their faces set in smug masks, clearly having decided on a strategy. "Audrey, what are you doing here?" Mallory whispered harshly, leaning in close so no one else could hear. "Did you follow us? Did you get a job as a waitress tonight? You really are pathetic." "That's my clever girl," Brenda chimed in, her voice a low hiss. "You're right. Without her kind of service, the party wouldn't be happening. Just try not to spill anything on the guests, dear." Before I could formulate a reply that wouldn't involve me causing a scene, Garrett Shaw materialized at my side. The Colemans' eyes lit up. This was their chance to put me in my place. "Excuse me, Mr. Shaw," Brenda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she addressed Garrett. "This person, she's not with us. She's just a former maid of ours who has some delusions of grandeur. Could you please escort her out through the service entrance? We simply can't be seen associating with the help. It would be terribly embarrassing." Garrett didn't even glance at them. His eyes were fixed respectfully on me. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice carrying clearly in a momentary lull of conversation. "The gala is about to begin. Your mother would like you to join her on the dais. The photographers are waiting." The Colemans froze. Their smiles vanished as if wiped away by an invisible hand. "Miss Vance?" Mallory stammered, the color draining from her face. I gave them a cool, serene smile, the kind I'd seen my mother use. "Have fun," I said softly. "If you make it in." I turned and walked away with Garrett, feeling their shocked, hateful stares burning into my back. From my position beside my mother on the raised platform at the front of the ballroom, I had a perfect view of the entrance. I watched as Garrett calmly intercepted them. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the invitation being dismissed with a slight shake of his head. I saw the expensive gift they brought for my mother being politely but firmly refused. I saw their faces turn from confusion to disbelief, then to pure, sputtering rage as two large but discreet security guards materialized and escorted them off the property. A few minutes later, my mother stepped up to the microphone. The crowd of hundreds fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice ringing with pride and emotion. "Thank you all for coming tonight. For over 2 decades, a part of my heart has been missing. Tonight, it is whole again." She turned and smiled at me, her eyes shining. "Allow me to introduce my daughter. The person we are honoring tonight. The long-lost heir to the Vance family and the Starlight Corporation, my daughter, Audrey Vance." A spotlight hit me. The entire ballroom erupted in applause. As I stood there, smiling under the warm lights, I caught a final glimpse of the Colemans being led away outside the grand glass doors. They had cast me out, called me a stray. Now, they couldn't even get past the front door of my home. The irony was so thick, so satisfying, I could taste it. A week after the gala, my life had settled into a new, surreal normal. But my mother had one more bombshell to drop. "There's something else you should know, Audrey," she said one morning over a breakfast of fresh fruit and coffee on the terrace. "Your grandfather, my father, was a man who believed in alliances, not just in business, but in family. He made an arrangement long ago. A betrothal, to unite our family with another powerful one. You have a fiancé." I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Mom, this isn't the 18th century. I can't just marry some stranger you and Grandpa picked out. His name is Leland Hayes, she continued calmly, as if she hadn't heard my outburst. He's the heir to the Harrison Empire. A truly brilliant young man. He took over a struggling tech company, Bright Path, and turned it into a Fortune 500 company in just 3 years. He's respected. He's powerful. And he's handsome. She slid a photo across the table. He was, in fact, very handsome. My head was spinning. An arranged marriage? It felt like one step forward and 2 steps back into a life that wasn't my own. But then, an idea, a rebellious spark, started to form. "I won't meet him," I said, my voice firm. "Not like this. Not as Audrey Vance, the billionaire heiress with a $1 billion prenup, I assume." My mother raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Then how?" "I want to know who he really is," I explained, leaning forward. "Not the CEO, not the heir. The man. And I want him to know who I really am, without all of this." I gestured around at the opulent terrace, the manicured gardens, the staff waiting silently in the wings. "I heard Bright Path is having a job fair soon. I'm going to apply for a job. Under a different name. I have a portfolio of my jewelry designs. I'll get a job on my own merit. I'll get to know him on my own terms." A slow, appreciative smile spread across Eleanor's face. "That is a very wise plan," she said. "Very much something I would do." "Very well. Do what you must. Just be careful." And so, a few days later, after a crash course from Garrett on how to create a plausible, non-billionaire resume, I found myself standing in the bustling, glass and steel lobby of the Bright Path headquarters. I was Audrey Parker, a high school graduate with a passion for design and a few years of receptionist experience. I was clutching my portfolio, my heart thumping with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I was just another hopeful candidate, lost in a sea of ambitious young people in business suits. It felt normal. It felt good. For the first time, I was completely in control of my own destiny. The interview process was a rude awakening and a brutal reminder of the world outside the Vance estate. The first woman who interviewed me, a sharp-faced manager named Ms. Albright with a severe haircut, took one look at my resume and scoffed audibly. 25 and just a high school diploma? Are you sure this isn't a mistake? What is the recruiting team doing, bringing in someone like you for a designer position? I know a diploma is just a foot in the door, I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my resolve. But I have years of practical experience. If you would just look at my design portfolio. What would someone with a high school education even know about the principles of jewelry design? She sneered, pushing my portfolio back across the table without opening it. You probably can't even tell the difference between a gemstone and a piece of glass. We're looking for professionals here, not hobbyists. You're wasting my time. Get out. I stood there for a moment, stunned and humiliated. My face burned. I gathered my things, my hands shaking with anger, and was about to leave when the door opened. A man in a tailored suit, whom I later learned was the vice president, Mr. Wilson, entered the room. He was followed by a younger man dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt, looking more like a friendly IT guy than an executive. My breath caught in my throat. It was the man from the taco truck, the one I had helped. He made no sign of recognition, his expression perfectly neutral, but his eyes met mine for a fleeting second. Mr. Wilson saw the scene, me standing, ready to leave, Ms. Albright looking smug, and frowned. What's going on here? Mr. Wilson, I was just about to throw this pitiful excuse for a candidate out, Ms. Albright said, puffing up with self-importance. She clearly lied on her resume to get in here. She has no qualifications, no degree. A complete waste of our time. The man from the taco truck, who I now realized must be someone very important if he was walking around with the VP, gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head to Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson's entire demeanor changed in an instant. He smiled warmly at me. Miss Parker, he said, picking up my portfolio from the table. I would like to sincerely apologize for how my staff has treated you. He flipped through the first few pages, his eyebrows rising in genuine appreciation. These designs, they are quite impressive. Very fresh, very innovative. Here at Bright Path, we value raw talent far more than degrees on a wall. The job is yours. You can start this afternoon. Ms. Albright stared, her mouth hanging open like a fish. What? But, sir, her lack of a college fund for education is a clear indicator. You, Mr. Wilson said, turning to her, his voice now cold as steel, are clearly not fit for your job of identifying talent. Go to my office and pick up your final paycheck. You're fired. I was utterly stunned. As I was led to the front desk to fill out my paperwork, my head was spinning. The man from the taco truck had disappeared. Who was he? He wasn't Leland Hayes, the handsome CEO from the photo. I had a feeling my time at Bright Path was going to be anything but simple. My first day on the job brought a shock that was even bigger and far more unpleasant than getting hired. My new department manager, the man I had to report to, was Preston. My ex-fiancé. He looked as shocked to see me as I was to see him, his face going pale when I walked into the department meeting. But his shock quickly morphed into a greasy, predatory smirk that I knew all too well. After the meeting, when the others had left, he called me into his glass-walled office. Well, he said, leaning back in his big leather chair, the picture of a petty tyrant. If it isn't my runaway bride. It's a small world, huh? Since we split up, I've only gone up in the world. I'm a manager now. I guess that makes me your boss. I just stared at him, my stomach churning with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. Of all the departments in all the companies in the world, I had to walk into his. You know, he continued, getting up and walking around his desk toward me, his eyes roaming over me in a way that made my skin crawl. You're going to have to please me now if you want to keep this little job. Meet all of my demands. I've missed our special times. He reached out to touch my arm. Stop it, I said, pulling away sharply. That's harassment, and you know it. Harassment? He laughed, a short, ugly bark. Please. You are just another notch on my belt. I do what I want, when I want. Just as he lunged for me, trying to back me into a corner, a voice cut through the tension like a knife. I think that's enough. It was the man from the taco truck. Andy, he'd introduced himself as to the team. Andy Ford, another new intern, just like me. He was standing in the doorway of Preston's office, his expression calm but his eyes as hard as stone. And who are you? Preston sneered, annoyed at the interruption. Some new intern? The ethics police? You think you can take me on? I think you should back away from her, Andy said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. Now. Preston, for all his bluster, was a coward at heart. He seemed to recognize a threat he couldn't handle. He backed off, muttering a curse under his breath. Andy stayed until Preston had slunk back behind his desk. You okay? He asked me softly when we were outside the office. I just nodded, too shaken to speak. Later that day, Mallory showed up, swinging a designer handbag. Apparently, she and Preston were still an item, a match made in opportunistic hell. When she saw me sitting at a desk, her face contorted with pure rage. She stormed into Preston's office, and I could hear her screeching through the glass. "You need to fire her. Now." Preston, ever eager to please his new meal ticket, came up with a plan. He strode over to my desk, holding a thick file, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "Audrey," he said loudly, so the whole office could hear. "Here's a little task to see if you're really cut out for this. This is a top priority jewelry design project for a major client, Starlight Corporation. I want all design elements finalized and client approval within 1 week." The office went silent. A project of that magnitude would normally take a team of senior designers months. Getting approval from a corporate powerhouse like Starlight in a week was laughable. It was impossible. "You're setting her up for failure," Andy Leland said calmly from his desk beside mine. "So what if I am?" Preston smirked at him, then looked back at me. "In fact, Audrey, I suggest you just give up now and leave. But, to make things interesting, if you somehow manage to pull this off, I'll run around the block 3 times. Naked." I looked him straight in the eye, a cold, calm fury settling over me. "You better start scrubbing up," I said. "You're going to need it." The next few days were a blur of frantic work and sleepless nights. I was fueled by black coffee and a burning desire to wipe that arrogant smirk off Preston's face for good. The task was monumental, but I had a secret weapon. I called my mother. "That is absolutely unacceptable," she fumed when I told her about Preston's scheme. "That man is not only incompetent, he's a liability. Garrett, have the jet turned around immediately. My daughter needs me." She cut her business trip to Paris short and flew back to California that same day. We turned my luxurious bedroom into a war room. Designs were sketched, revised, and perfected. Market analysis reports were generated by Starlight's top team. A full proposal was drafted. My mother, with her decades of experience, was a force of nature, and working alongside her, I felt a surge of confidence I'd never known. With the full resources of Starlight Corporation behind me, the impossible became possible. On the 3rd day, Preston had changed the deadline from a week to 3 days just to be crueler. I walked into the office, calm and collected. I placed the thick, professionally bound proposal, complete with the elegant, authoritative signature of Eleanor Vance, CEO of Starlight Corporation, on Preston's desk. He stared at it as if it were a snake. His face went pale. He opened the folder, his hands trembling slightly as he saw the signed approval. "How?" he stammered, his voice a strangled squeak. "But, you're just a, how did you deceive them? This has to be a forgery." "Worry about your own deceptions, Preston," I said coolly. "You're due for a naked run." He started to bluster, his face turning a blotchy red. "I'm not doing it. I'm the manager here. I make the rules. What are you interns going to do about it?" "I don't think interns can do much," a calm voice said from behind me. "But the CEO can." We all turned. It was Andy. Or rather, it was Leland Hayes. He was standing there, no longer in jeans and a t-shirt, but in a perfectly fitted, devastatingly expensive suit. Mr. Wilson stood respectfully behind him, holding a file. Preston's jaw dropped. "Boss? You're Leland Hayes?" he whimpered. "If I hadn't posed as an intern, how would I have exposed a rat like you?" Leland said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the office. He took the file from Mr. Wilson. "Let's see. You've been bullying staff, particularly female employees. You've been stealing bonuses from your team members. You've been skimming from company credit accounts for personal dinners with Ms. Coleman." He looked up, his eyes cold as ice. "It's all right here. You're fired." Preston started begging, pleading, promising he'd change. It was pathetic. "Oh, and the run," Leland added thoughtfully, a slight smile touching his lips. "Yes, the run. You'll still do that. But it won't save your job. He then looked at Preston with a look of pure dismissal. Actually, our company values unique contributions. I do have another position for you. Starting today, you will be our restroom maintenance engineer. A vital role. A security came to escort a blubbering Preston away. Mallory, who had been watching the entire drama unfold from the doorway, simply sneered at his pathetic form, turned on her heel, and walked away without a single backward glance. Her meal ticket was gone. And so was she. With Preston and Mallory out of the picture at Bright Path, I could finally focus on my work, and more importantly, on getting to know the real Leland Hayes. He apologized for the deception, explaining he liked to go undercover in new branches to see how things really worked. I, in turn, confessed that I wasn't Audrey Parker. When I told him who I really was, he just smiled. I had a feeling there was more to the taco truck girl than met the eye, he said. But our work wasn't done. It was time to settle the score with the Colemans for good. My mother, Leland, Garrett, and I sat in the library one evening, planning the final act. It felt like a council of war. The plan is simple, yet devastating, Garrett explained, laying out a series of financial reports on the large oak table. We will use a Starlight subsidiary to offer Coleman Trading a massive, once-in-a-lifetime contract, a $200 million deal to be their exclusive distributor. It will be the bait. Robert Coleman, blinded by greed and desperation, took it without a second thought. Just as Garrett predicted, he poured every last cent of his company's capital, took up massive loans from predatory lenders, and leveraged all his remaining personal assets to fund the production. He was all in. And that's when we pulled the plug. My mother made a few calls to her old friends in the shipping and manufacturing industries. One by one, every single supplier the Colemans relied on mysteriously canceled their contracts, citing unforeseen circumstances. Every other smaller client they had suddenly pulled out, claiming breach of minor clauses. Leland's bank, which held Robert's business accounts, froze his lines of credit due to suspicious activity. They were left with $1 billion order they couldn't fulfill and no way to get materials or pay their staff. They were trapped in a financial cage of our making. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Robert. His voice was frantic, broken. Audrey, I don't know who else to turn to. The lawyers are calling non-stop. We're going bankrupt. We're facing $1 billion in penalties from Starlight for breach of contract. You're with Leland Hayes now. Can't you put in a good word for us? For old time's sake? I know we made mistakes. A part of me, a small, foolish part that still remembered him teaching me how to ride a bike, felt a pang of something that might have been pity. But then I remembered the coldness in Brenda's eyes. I remembered the smug smile on Mallory's face. And most of all, I remembered his silent cowardice in that stairwell. I'm sorry, Robert, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. There's nothing I can do. They lost everything. The business they had spent a lifetime building. The last of their savings. Their reputation was in tatters. I heard from Garrett that they had been evicted and had moved into a rundown, one-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town. The empire they had built on my bone marrow had finally, irrevocably, crumbled to dust. In a final, pathetic Hail Mary, the Colemans invited Leland over for dinner at their cramped, squalid apartment. They had somehow scraped together enough money to buy an expensive-looking necklace, which Garrett, after a quick search online, confirmed was a cheap counterfeit from China, to give to his new girlfriend, hoping to curry favor and beg for a lifeline. They still didn't know his new girlfriend was me. Leland, ever the strategist, accepted the invitation. He wanted to see just how low they would stoop. I arrived a few minutes after him, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater. When the Colemans saw me, they sneered. The apartment smelled of boiled cabbage and desperation. Audrey, what are you doing here? Brenda demanded, blocking the doorway. Still trying to seduce Mr. Harrison? Look, we know he has a new, important girlfriend. Stop embarrassing yourself and leave. Leland invited me, I said simply. You dare call Mr. Hayes by his first name? She shrieked, her voice thin and reedy. Why would he want you here? To serve us? Well, serve us well tonight, and maybe, just maybe, we'll put in a good word for you with Mr. Hayes. Get your old intern job back. Get up from there, Mallory chimed in from the lumpy sofa where she was sulking. She pointed to a rickety stool in the corner. You have no right to sit at this table. Go pour us some wine. Before I could move, Leland, who had been watching this exchange with a look of cold fury, spoke. His voice was dangerously quiet. Then what gives you the right to speak to her that way? He stood up from the rickety dining chair, walked over to me, and took my hand in his, lacing his fingers through mine. He looked directly at Brenda, Robert, and Mallory. I believe you were asking when my girlfriend would be arriving. Well, she's already here. The color drained from their faces in 3 successive waves. They stared at our joined hands, then at my face, their minds struggling to connect the impossible dots. Oh, and this necklace, Leland said, picking up the fake piece of jewelry from the stained coffee table. He let it dangle from his fingers for a moment before dropping it with a clatter. I appreciate the thought, but Audrey already has the real one. It was my welcome home gift to her. They started stammering, backtracking, calling Leland their dearest son-in-law and pleading for him to save them. It was the most pathetic, grotesque display I had ever witnessed. I looked at the 3 people who had caused me so much pain, now groveling at my feet in a smelly apartment. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a profound and final emptiness. They were strangers to me. We got up and left them there, in the ruins of their own making. You would think that after losing absolutely everything, Mallory would have learned her lesson. You would be wrong. With nowhere else to go and no skills to speak of, she somehow managed to land an internship at Starlight Corporation, my mother's company. It was the lowest rung on the ladder, but it was a foot in the door. Coincidentally, I had also decided to start an internship there myself, under my Audrey Parker identity, to learn the family business from the ground up, just as my mother had done. Word got around the office that the mysterious, long-lost Vance heiress was starting as an intern that day to learn the ropes. When Mallory walked in, dressed in the best clothes she could find at a consignment shop, trying desperately to project an air of wealth she no longer possessed, the other interns immediately swarmed her. You must be the Vance heiress, one of them gushed. Your elegance is unmistakable. Mallory, ever the opportunist, didn't miss a beat. A smug, familiar smile spread across her face. She soaked up the attention like a dying plant in a rainstorm. I see you've noticed, she said haughtily. Well, I expect you all to show me the ropes. When I walked in a few minutes later, in my simple, practical work clothes, no one gave me a second glance. Mallory saw me, and for a moment, her eyes widened in pure panic. But she quickly recovered, pulling me into a supply closet. Save it, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. I heard Leland dumped you for the real Vance heiress. If you dare expose me, I'll tell everyone about your pathetic, failed gold-digging attempt. Let's see how you survive here then. And so, the most surreal charade of my life began. Mallory played the part of the pampered heiress, delegating her work and basking in the adoration of her colleagues. And I, the actual heiress, became her personal assistant. Audrey, fetch me a coffee, no sugar, 3 creams, she'd command from her desk. Audrey, make these copies, and don't smudge them this time. Audrey, my mother pays for your peanuts of a salary, so you can do my work, too, while I go to lunch. I endured it all in a strange, detached silence. I did my work, and hers, without complaint. I let her believe she was winning. I was playing a much longer game, and the final move was about to be made. One day, news broke that Eleanor Vance had purchased a spectacular $300 million mansion in Beverly Hills as a wedding gift for her daughter. My new colleagues, of course, rushed to congratulate Mallory. Oh, that, she said with a dismissive wave of her hand, as if it were a triviality. Buying mansions is just like picking up burgers for my mom. Nothing to fuss over. Dare we ask for a tour? Someone asked breathlessly. Mallory paled for a second, then recovered with a brilliant lie. Of course. But the villa isn't ready yet. It hasn't been furnished. She had no idea that her own parents, Brenda and Robert, were now working as part of the cleaning crew for that very mansion, a brutally humbling job Garrett had arranged to give them a taste of real hard work. That night, Mallory wheedled the master keys out of her father, promising just a quick, harmless tour for a few new friends from work. She was walking right into the trap I had so carefully set. The next day, Mallory led a group of fawning interns into my mansion. My new mansion. So, what do you think of my house? She asked, gesturing expansively at the grand foyer, her voice filled with false ownership. This place is just one of many, of course. It's so hard to keep track, you know. She was a terrible liar. Her ignorance was astounding. When someone asked where the bathroom was, she pointed confidently toward a door that I knew led to the main kitchen pantry. I, standing quietly in the back of the group, gently corrected her. It's over there, to the right of the staircase. And how would you know? Mallory snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. Oh, please, another intern sneered at me, eager to curry favor with the heiress. She's probably cleaned plenty of houses like this in her day. She knows the floor plan. The tour continued, with Mallory's lies getting more and more absurd. The final act began when her parents, my former parents, Brenda and Robert, arrived in their drab, gray cleaning uniforms to start their shift. Mallory, panicking at their unexpected appearance, decided to lean into her role. She treated them like dirt. What took you so long? She barked at her own father as he pushed a cleaning cart. The help decided to take a lunch break together? She ordered her mother to get her a glass of water, and when Brenda, her hands trembling, fumbled and spilled a little on the marble floor, Mallory's face twisted in an ugly mask of rage. Can't you do anything right? She shrieked, her voice echoing in the cavernous foyer. Where did my mother find this clumsy maid? She's a disaster. You're fired. She actually fired her own mother from a house that wasn't hers. I couldn't stay silent a moment longer. Don't you think you're being a bit harsh? I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. She's just a maid, Audrey. Mallory spat back, turning on me. I can treat my staff however I want. It's my house. Mallory, this game needs to end, I said, my voice low and dangerous. The truth will come out sooner or later, and you will pay for your actions. She just laughed in my face. Then, in a final act of malice, she declared I must be a thief. She grabbed my purse, which was sitting on a nearby chair, and dumped its contents onto the floor. Let's see what you've stolen, she sneered. Nothing but cheap stuff here. She kicked my wallet across the floor. She then pulled a couple $100 bills from her own pocket and threw them at my face. Here's for your fake bag. Now get out of my house. That was the last straw. The rage that had been simmering inside me for months, for years, finally boiled over. I slapped her. Hard. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. You hit Miss Vance, one of the interns gasped in horror. You're dead. She will be the one who will pay, I said, my voice trembling with a fury I didn't know I possessed, because I am the real Miss Vance. What nonsense! Mallory shrieked, recovering from the shock, her cheek bright red. You two, finish her, she ordered her new sycophantic friends. They started to close in on me, their faces menacing. I was cornered, alone, with nowhere to run. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. That way, I'll know you gave me a like, and I'll know that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please, comment the number 1, and then listen as I tell you the rest of my story. Just as they lunged for me, the grand double doors of the mansion swung open with a resounding boom. Standing there, framed in the doorway like avenging angels, were my mother, Eleanor Vance, and my fiancé, Leland Hayes. Their faces were like thunderclouds, their eyes filled with a cold, righteous anger. "How dare you bully my daughter?" My mother's voice was deathly calm, which was far more terrifying than if she had yelled. The entire room froze. The interns stopped in their tracks, their eyes darting between me, a furious Mallory, and the two incredibly powerful figures in the doorway. "She's your daughter?" one of them stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. "And you are her fiancé?" another whispered, looking at the formidable Leland Hayes. Leland walked over to me and put a protective arm around my shoulders, his presence a solid, comforting weight. "The real issue here," he said, his gaze sweeping over the terrified group of interns, "is that you are all trespassing on private property." As if on cue, Garrett Shaw appeared behind them, his phone already in his hand, clearly on a call with security. "Trespassing, assault, and property damage," my mother added, gesturing to my purse and its contents scattered on her pristine marble floor. "I believe our family lawyer will be very interested in this. That's good for at least a decade in jail for all of you." Absolute panic erupted. Mallory fell to her knees, her cruel facade crumbling into pathetic sobs. "Please, Mrs. Vance, don't call the police," she begged, crawling towards my mother. "It was a misunderstanding. And my parents, they can work off my debt. They can clean toilets, anything." She pointed a shaking finger at Brenda and Robert, who were huddled by the door, looking horrified and ashamed. "I'm too young for jail. We raised you, and this is how you treat us?" Robert finally found his voice, staring at his daughter in utter disbelief and disgust. "It's what you deserve." Mallory shrieked back at them, her sanity clearly snapping. "You should pay off my debts. And when I land a rich man and get some money, I'll come and save you." My mother looked at her with pure contempt. She then turned to Robert and Brenda. "I no longer consider her your daughter," she said, her voice filled with a quiet finality that was more damning than any insult. Brenda and Robert then turned to me, their eyes pleading, filled with tears. "Audrey, we're sorry," Brenda sobbed. "We were so wrong. We realize our mistakes now. Can you ever forgive us? Please, let us make it up to you. You're getting married soon, please, let us come to your wedding." I looked at these three people who had defined my life for so long through their cruelty, their selfishness, and their neglect. I thought I would feel a storm of anger, or even a flicker of sadness. But I felt nothing. Just a profound sense of closure, like closing the final page of a long, sad book. "You don't owe me an apology," I said, my voice clear and steady, echoing in the now silent hall. "If anything, I should thank you. Thank you for not loving me. Because if you had, I never would have found my real mother and the real meaning of family. You have all received your just desserts. From now on, we are strangers." I turned to Garrett, who was now standing with two uniformed police officers. "Call the police. Take her away." As Mallory was led away in handcuffs, sobbing and screaming my name, I didn't look back. I walked over to my mother and Leland, and together, we walked out of the grand room and into the warm California sunshine of my new life. The past was finally, truly, behind me. A few months later, Leland and I stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the same spot where my mother had told me my story. We weren't planning a big, fancy wedding. Just something small, with the people who truly loved us. He squeezed my hand. "Happy?" he asked. I looked at the endless blue horizon, at the man I loved beside me, and thought of the incredible woman who was my mother. "More than you'll ever know," I said. And I meant it. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been hard to tell. If you have a story of your own, about overcoming betrayal and finding your own strength, I'd love to read it in the comments below. Your stories give me strength, just as I hope mine gives you some too. Thank you for being here with me.